Okay, so we're going to be continuing today in the class, Ruin and Rebirth, and welcome to those of you who are guests today. And we're going to be starting to deal with the topic today on both the historical level a little bit, but really the history we're maybe going to deal more in the next couple of classes. But we're going to be looking at, hashkafically, halachically, and historically, the violence between Jews and Arabs, and Jews and British, as we'll see. There was a significant amount of violence between the Jews and the British during this time period that we're discussing as well. Now, what is the time period that we're discussing? Really it goes up until today, some of the topics that we're going to be talking about, but we're discussing specifically, again, like we've been this whole time now, the interwar years now between World War I and World War II, following the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, which happened, right, we said that was when the world was, all the conquered lands of the Ottomans and the Germans were divided up between the Allies. This is when the League of Nations, which is like the precursor to the UN, began during this time period. And this is what we said, was the time period that created a tremendous amount of tension in the Middle East, and specifically in what was then Palestine. Because what was happening now was that Palestine was under the British mandate. That meant, again, we're not going to go through all the history again, but they made various promises to the Arabs about dividing up different lands, but really behind the scenes, in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the French and the British carved it up themselves and ignored the Arab aspirations for nationhood. And the British now took control of Palestine, and control of Israel. This is called the period of the British Mandate of Palestine. Just understand what it was technically. So in a war, you have the winning side is an occupying army, right? Let's just understand these terms. These are the terms that are thrown about in Israel a lot also. What does it mean, the occupying army? So let's just take, in World War II. So the Allies won the war. The American side of the Allies won from the West, and the Russians won from the East. So Berlin, at the end of World War II, was occupied by the British, by the Americans, and by the Russians. Where the army that wins is there. And usually for a time period, the occupying army is there and helps to create a transition to whatever the next government is going to be. But in this case, so the British went from the occupying force to the mandate, which meant that they were now the official rulers over Palestine, over this land, and they were in charge of immigration, they were in charge of all of the laws of the land, in charge of enforcing the laws, the police. All of these things were run by the British during this time period. Now, we explained that during this time, during the 20s, I didn't make a copy. Okay, I'm on a page of the numbers of the Jewish immigration during this time. I didn't do it. Okay, so during this time period, there was huge immigration into Israel. We spoke about this last week from the halachic side of things, right? About the halachos of moving to Israel, even though it was a sakana, etc. But we said, there was terrible turmoil going on in Eastern Europe, and it was a very, very, very bad time to be, living as a Jew over there then. And many people during this time period moved to Palestine, and the British were encouraging of it. The British were open to it throughout this time. They were allowing, and in addition, there was plenty of illegal immigration that was taking place as well. When things really began to heat up in terms of the immigration was then later in the 30s. Once Hitler came to power in Germany, and once things in the Eastern Europe started getting even worse, then the numbers increased dramatically. Now, what happened as a result of all of these Jews coming into Palestine was it began to, it began to create, it began to create a lot of tension with the indigenous Arab population that was there, with the Arabs that were there. Now, what's the idea behind this tension? So it's twofold, really. Number one, you have to understand that the Arabs were very disappointed by not realizing their hopes to get an actual state or an actual nation following World War I, and that was something that was extremely frustrating for them. And there was all sorts of things that were going on, in Syria, Lebanon, etc., which we're not going to be speaking about. So that was number one. But worse than that, as far as they were concerned, is that there was this massive influx of Ashkenaz, white European Jews that were now coming into Palestine, coming into this area, buying up land at a rapid pace, opening up Hebrew University, opening up all sorts of offices and setting up a whole sort of infrastructure, getting ready for a country on the land that the Arabs said was theirs, that they'd been living on for generations. And this is really when tensions between Jews and Arabs began to turn violent. Really, in 1920 is the first time that there was like a significant uptick in violence in terms of Arab attacks against Jews. Throughout those years, the 20s and into the 30s, so there was a tremendous amount of violence and tension that had never existed before. Again, Jews and Arabs had lived in Palestine, had lived here, for hundreds of years, side by side. They were friends. They were, just like in any other country. But when this following World War I is really when all the tensions, began, and the Arabs began, resorting to these acts of violence, acts of what we would call terrorism, right? Attacking soft targets, attacking civilian targets, in order to do two things: in order to one, deter Jews from moving to Palestine, and two, to get the British mandate to stop allowing Jews to move. So they would be attacking Jews, they'd be attacking the British, and in fact, it was successful as a result of this. The numbers of immigrants that were allowed were affected, which we're not going to speak about today. But what I do want to speak about, though, is the Jewish response to this violence. How did the Jews respond to the different groups that there were? We're going to speak a little bit about. And what is the halachic and hashkafic perspective of terrorism? What is the perspective of going and attacking people who are innocent, but in order to further cause, because as we're going to see, this is something that was on both sides. I want to start with this. I'm sorry that this is a little bit upsetting. It's a little bit graphic, so if you're upset by graphic descriptions of violence, so hold your ears or don't listen, or walk out for a minute and don't read along. But I want to read this, and there's a reason that I want to go through this. We're going to read about an account. This is a little bit later than the years that we're talking about. This took place in 1948, but it's a fairly typical account of an attack that took place during this time, and I will read it. Now, this is coming from this book, the book called O Jerusalem, which is, you read it? Yeah, it's a very, very good book. Well, maybe this is yours. I don't know, I found it here. No, it was a few years ago, actually. So this is coming from this book. I keep this here at my office. Everybody wants to read it. It's a very, very good history. A lot of the stuff I speak about in this class comes from this book. So let's read this. This is a bombing that took place, a bus bombing at Shar Yafo. If anybody else can get papers, come and get them. A bus bombing that took place in Shar Yafo, January 1948, which killed 20 and injured. Okay, so H.M. looked at his watch. He and his wife had cut short the ritual courtesy visit they paid each other. I don't want to read this whole thing. I don't want to read it all inside. I don't want to read it inside. I want you to read this on your own time. I would like for you to read it. It's going to take too long to go through the whole thing now. But it's the description from both sides. It's a very interesting book, this book. It's written, first of all, it's written very nicely. It's written like, not like fiction, but it's written like, with conversations and stories, and he fills in, they fill in a lot of the story of what happened behind the scenes. But what's fascinating about the book is that it's based on thousands of interviews that they had with people that lived through this time period, of the 20s and 30s and 40s in Israel, and including the participants in the violence on both sides. They interviewed the Arab people who had been terrorists during this time, and Jewish fighters and everything. So he's telling you the story about. Okay, let's read it. Okay, let's just start from the next thing. The commander told the driver to stop, then turned and looked back. And C, light your bomb, he said. Yeah, C reached into his pocket and stiffened. He was a non-smoker, and in his excitement, he had forgotten to put into his pocket a matchbox to light the bomb. The commander coolly stood up, walked to the back of the van, and handed C a pack of matches from his own pocket. C scraped the box over the matches, ringing the fuse. Singeing the fuse. Okay. When he threw open the rear doors of the police van and looked out for the first time on his target. Okay, so we have a van that's driving that was stolen by people. And they have, this is a true story, this is a true account, they have in the back there like a big barrel that is full of explosives, and he's lighting a fuse, and he's going to push the barrel out of the back of the van into a crowd of civilians. A sea of surprised faces stared up at him. At his feet, the fuse sputtered. For a second, he peered out at those figures, at what seemed to him like hundreds of people, a real crowd, all shocked and startled. Right? This is a quote from him. The people who wrote this book interviewed this person. They were the evening crowd of number 3 bus riders waiting for the number 3 bus at the Jaffa gate stop. They have seen the devils, he thought. They see the bomb right in front of them with the fuse burning. He reached down and with his athlete's arm began to twist the bomb gently down onto the pavement in their midst. It thudded to the ground, sparks spitting from its fuse. The crowd seemed paralyzed with terror, staring at first at the bomb, then at C as if he were a figure in a nightmare, as if he thought they were in a movie that had suddenly stopped. He reached out to close the door, his arms passing within hand reach of those stunned number 3 bus riders about to be killed by the bomb he had just set down among them. The door closed, and C could still see their uncomprehending faces as he snapped it shut. Okay, this is this terrorist relating what he was seeing and thinking when he went in. The explosion went off at the instant. HM and his wife won their race for the number 3 bus, right? In the first paragraph it says that they were, rushing to get to the bus. Still holding hands, they were hurled backward by the shock, struggling up into a sitting position. M gagged at the horrible spectacle all around him. The enormous square was littered with bodies, bits and pieces of them strewn across the pavement like chunks of meat. Next to the bus stop was a store whose owner had been cranking down his metal shutter when the bomb went off. They have those metal shutters that come down. The explosion had driven his body into the screen, impaling it on its raw metal edges in a grotesque crucifixion. He turned to his wife on the pavement beside him. She was covered with blood, her eyes half open. "Something is falling inside me," she mumbled, then her eyes closed. He spoke to her, but there was no answer. He knelt over her and took her limp hand in his, begging for a reply. There was none. Even her convulsive shudders had stopped. Screaming, he leaped up to his feet, pleading for help, for an ambulance to get her to a hospital. 3 hours later, a duty surgeon at the hospital came out of the operating room into which they had wheeled his wife. He looked at me, Blank later recalled, "I couldn't talk, but I knew what his eyes were telling." Okay, so this is a very upsetting, disturbing scene of a bombing which killed 20 people, injured dozens more. And we read an account like this, we read it, and it's like, it's not human. How can a person do such a thing, right? But we know that terrorists have cheshbon, right? They have a sort of morality in their mind, right? What is it? So let's take a look at this quote over here. Quote, "Why we do what we do." Okay, this is a quote taken from, again, we'll see this line, right? One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. You ever heard of that line? One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? Because we'll see, doing things based on what goal am I doing them on, that's where a lot of our judgment comes from. So let's read what this quote is. Why we do what we do. "How can we kill innocents and claim we have a just cause?" Right? That's the question that anybody want to ask any terrorist. How can you possibly think that you have some justification and that this is going to further your cause and this is going to help your aspirations by killing a store owner, by killing people like this? So basically there's 3 points here that are made. Number 1, we must make the enemy know that they will face vengeance for their crimes against us. Our disgrace and suffering come at a price. Okay, that's number 1. There's a desire for revenge. My people are hurt, my people are disgraced, so there's a desire for revenge. 2, we must act on a scale to make it clear to the world that we do not tolerate the oppression and indignity imposed upon us or our people. We're not just looking to just to take revenge, or just to punish, or just to hurt the person who hurt us. No, we're doing things on a bigger scale. We're going to kill more people. We're going to kill innocent people, children. Right? We're going to kill on a scale that's going to get the attention of the world. We must act on a scale to make it clear to the world that we do not tolerate the oppression and indignity imposed upon us or our people. We are few up against many. And this is the 3rd point. We are few up against many. We have no defender, no savior to protect us or demand retribution for the crimes against us. Right? They feel powerless. We are small and powerless in the face of an open war. So who can blame us for resorting to striking the enemy at its softest spot and taking advantage of its every weakness? Who can blame people who are oppressed, feel that they have no other recourse, to go in an open war and just say, okay, we're going to attack your army? That there's no way to do that in the world. There's nothing. So who can blame us for doing things like this in order to get our message across, in order to accomplish what we need to do? Okay, so now these are words that I'm sure a justification we heard. What do you say to this? How do you respond? Is this legitimate or not? Is this a justification or not for violence, for blowing up a man and his wife and the store owner? Is this a justification or not?
I believe it's a justification because with any struggle in life, you have to figure out how to get through the obstacle and not around it using some sort of like excuse to do something worse in revenge of what happened to you. And that's just what I think.
Okay. Malka, what do you say?
I don't agree with that at all.
Okay, what do you say?
There's no justification for it. We hear stories today of like a family being killed out for what? For something that a government has been doing? What do innocent civilians have anything to do with war between, like, what does it do with politics? Has nothing to do with it.
Okay, those are two sides, yeah?
I agree with Martha, and also I think it's just a cowardly way to do things. I think it's just they know they'll lose if they ever join the army, so they're going the easy way out for themselves.
Okay.
This shouldn't be justified in any way.
Okay. Yeah, Natalia?
So I agree with Mocha and Dasi in a sort of different light. I think it's morally intolerable regardless of whether or not it's done by the Jewish people for Israeli independence. And I definitely agree with Mocha's point that you cannot target a group of people for its government's actions.
Okay, Lauren and Adina and then Odalisi, yeah?
Based on what they've all been saying, also people use excuse for, oh, they have a disease or, whatever they're going through. I don't think that's an excuse at all. They have a problem.
Okay, good, very good. Like we were saying, they're not class, and Adina, very good. Yeah, Dina?
There's no excuse. They're not making anything better for themselves. If anything, it's making it worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so who said this quote? Who wrote this quote? Who said this? So I will put forth to you that this was said. This is a little bit strange to say, and I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, but this was said by what I feel are the first. Would everybody agree that this is the definition of terrorism, right? The definition of terrorism: hitting a soft target in an underhanded way in order to deliver a message that you can't do otherwise.
Yeah.
Who said this? Turn the page. Okay. This week's Parsha. Unbelievable how it works out. This week's Parsha. Shimon and Levi. What do? Shimon and Levi, their sister is attacked, right? Disgraced, suffers terribly, and they're filled with a feeling to do something about it, to take revenge. But what do? They don't just go and kill Shechem and Hamor, maybe, right? They don't just kill the person who did this. They go and they wipe out an entire village, an entire town of people are killed. Man, woman, not man and child, that's not true, they took women. Yeah, the men, they kill out an entire village, an entire city of people. So look, one second, we're going to talk about all this, just 1 second, but I want you to read now, this is Rav Moshe David Vali, this page that I enjoy very much on the Parsha, and look how he describes, right, when they say at the end, Hakizona Yasa es achosenu, is our sister going to be like a harlot? Is my sister a prostitute that we're not going to do anything about it? Yeah? Klomar, should we have just tolerated this and be quiet? Then the whole world would say, oh, those Bnei Yaakov, they don't care if their sister goes out and acts like a prostitute. Nobody cares if she does this. If we didn't do something about this, everybody would think it was okay. Everybody would think that we were okay with our sister being attacked and raped. This is not her honor and our honor, or your honor, Yaakov. Look what they say. We had to make it clear to the whole world. No, this was an outright offense against us. This is not something that we are going to stand for. And that's why we killed the whole city, because we needed everybody in the world to know about this. Not just like the local news, a local teenage girl avenged by her family. No, the whole world has to know. You don't do that to Klal Yisrael. And we're going to go and wipe out an entire city to prove that point. And if we did it in an underhanded, trickery way, we didn't fight fair, we played unfair, yeah? Everybody understands that we have to do that. We're dealing with, it's the president's son. The president's son was the one, right? The duke's son was the one that raped my sister. Now I'm going to go and file a complaint in the court against the king. That's what I'm going to do. And everybody knows we would be forced to do this because we're dealing with the president. There's no way we could go out in a flat-out war against him. So therefore we had to act in an underhanded way, with trickery, and got them to do the bris milah, and then waited 3 days until the hardest thing, and then and then they did it. So I would posit to you, I would put forth to you that this is probably the first time, maybe in history, or at least certainly in the Torah, what we see a justification for terrorism. Right? A justification for collective punishment of taking a whole town of people, a whole group of people, that they themselves were innocent. Maybe we'll see. We're going to see what the Rishonim have to say about this soon. And killing them all. Why? Not to protect myself, right? Not because we're going to see in a second the halacha of a rodef. Not because when I'm under threat I have a right to fight back. No, to make a point, to prove a point, in order to show something to the world, or to show something to these people. And that's what they went ahead and did. Now, we have to understand, like a few of you jumped up and said, but who said it was right? Who said it was okay what they did? Right? Maybe they did that, but it was usher to do. Who says that being a terrorist is justified just because you see that Shimon and Levi committed an act of terror? So that's what we need to examine now. We're going to take a look at this now. But what I want you to know is that this first story that we read, which I messed up, I missed one of them, but this was a Jewish bus bombing, meaning the 20 people that were killed, and the description of the crucified person, these are all Arabs that were killed when the guy C is Cohen is his name, when a group of Irgun terrorists is what they were, blew up a bomb and killed 20 innocent Arabs. People didn't do any. Yeah. This is. No, I'm not kidding. That's why I did it this way, because I want you to see, that. What are you saying?
You skipped over the wife's name.
One of them I missed. What are you saying?
You skipped over the Arab wife's name.
At the last one, you're saying?
Yeah.
I missed one of them. Yes, I realize that. But this is a book that, like I said, it's not pro-Arab or anti-Arab or pro-Israel. This is a very, very good history, and he gives this whole story. He interviewed this guy Cohen, who was the one who didn't have the matches on him and committed this mass murder. This was done in the name of establishing the state of Israel. This was done in order to seek revenge, make a point, which we're going to discuss. All of these things. But a big point of what I want to get across to you in this class, and again I've said this a lot of times in this class in general, but specifically in this class today, our picture of the violence in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and our picture of Israel's moral what's the word? That we have the moral high ground, in this conflict. So it may be true in more recent times. It may be true in more recent times that, but it certainly is not true in the beginning of the establishment of the state of Israel. There were many dozens, and I'm not saying right or wrong now. We're talking about it, but I just want to make the point of what the fact. I'll get you 1 second. Many dozens of acts of terror. And again, when I say terror, I mean not acts of protection. We had to kill this person in order to stop him from attacking us. I'm talking about the Irgun and Lehi fighters, kidnapping, torturing, and murdering British soldiers, Arab workers, Arab politicians, Arab doctors, all of these things that went on during that time period. And it makes it very complicated as far as understanding, which again, we're going to work this through over the course of the next couple of classes, of understanding the right and the wrong of this violence that went back and forth. But the one point I want to make now, and then I'll get your question, Dina, is just this point, is that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? In other words, when Menachem Begin, who became the president, the prime minister of Israel, he was involved in terrorism. He was a terrorist. He killed innocent people in order to further the cause of the establishment of the state of Israel. So, while we can say, yes, we're proud of him and he did, maybe the right thing, which again, we're going to talk about now, but we have to understand the way the world sees it. We have to understand that we see ourselves as right and justified because we see our cause as being justified, and therefore, if we're going to sanction or justify acts of terrorism like this, so we're saying the ends justifies the means. right? But they feel the exact same way, and for everybody else in the world, in Europe and America, right, regular observers, it's really just a matter of which side you agree with to determine whether or not you think it's okay, the violence that they're doing, right? We described this whole act of the weak against the strong, and like I said, during that time, that was the way the Jews felt, and they committed acts of terrorism in that way. Now the tables have turned, and this is the way that well, I shouldn't say it's turned, because the Arabs were doing it against us for many years before the Jews reciprocated with this. But again, we have to examine, is that okay?
Alright, so you're talking about Kahana, right?
About who?
Kahana?
No, I'm not talking about Kahana. No. It's Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin was...
No, the guy who shot 20 innocent people, is that what you're talking about?
No. You're mixing up like 2 or 3 different things. Meir Kahana was a person who never shot up or killed anybody. He himself was killed. You're talking Baruch Goldstein, who went into Maras Machpelah. Baruch Goldstein.
He was a doctor, he kind of got upset.
Yes, and he went into Maras Machpelah and killed a bunch of Arabs. Yes, right. Well, we didn't address that. That's not this story, but that was a terrible thing. I'm saying that was an act of terrorism, right? That was
right. So it is really wrong, but like it doesn't happen every day. Like these, like what Arabs do to us, like that.
No, so like I said, nowadays in your lifetime, the situation is very, very different. My lifetime, the truth is also. I'm talking during the 30s and 40s. There were many hundreds of acts of terrorism committed by Jews that in retrospect we only we see as justified because it was in the advancement of the state of Israel. There's all sorts of justifications. The state of Israel is necessary for our survival. There's also, again, we're going to talk about all of these points, but the point that I think a lot of us are not aware of growing up, I certainly was not really aware of this in terms of our learning, is that the idea of bus bombing and all of these types of things which we consider so abhorrent and so evil and so completely off the moral scale of what's acceptable to do, we did it. And the state of Israel, I could absolutely be argued, would not be here today if not for many such acts of terror against both the Arabs and against the British. The British left Israel basically because of a terror campaign by the Israelis, by the Zionists, which they got fed up of being here. There were more troops in Palestine by 1940 something than there were in the entire India. There were more British troops right here in Israel just to try to keep calm. And there's no question about it that our violence, Jewish violence, Zionist violence, was absolutely a factor in the establishment of the state of Israel. And that's something that we need to deal with and understand, again, from a hashkafic perspective, halachic perspective, which we'll get to. Yeah.
Isn't it the same thing like in Yehoshua when he's conquering?
Okay, very good. Okay, well that's one of the approaches here that we're going to see right now. Okay, so I want to move on now. Let's take a look at back to the source sheet. So we see this idea that they killed this city of Shechem. They wiped it out. It's so funny, when I was planning on giving this class this week, I didn't even realize that it was this week's Parshat, this whole thing. But they wiped out the city of Shechem. So the question is, like we said, was this okay or not? In Halacha, was this acceptable? So first of all, sources 1 and 2. We're just going to look at very quickly. This is just making the point that there's no question that the Torah allows for killing if that killing is in self-defense. If a person is able to kill somebody else in order to stop that person from killing me, that we call a rodef, right? The concept of a rodef. If somebody's chasing me, I can kill him. And that's the pasuk we have in number 2. In number 1, I'm sorry. Oh, it's number 1 I did twice. So it's 1. The second one. The Torah tells us if a person sneaks into my house, late at night, he's breaking into my house, and I kill him, so I'm not chayav misa. I don't get punished for killing the person that breaks into my house. Why? Because we assume if he's coming to break into my house, he's there to kill me. Yeah, because maybe I'm going to try to stand up and protect myself, and he's going to kill me, so therefore I have a right to kill him. And the Gemara tells us that this is the story. So the Gemara tells us this story about Shaul HaMelech, that David HaMelech went into a cave, and what does he see there in the cave? No, that's a different one. That's the spider that protected him. Here he goes and he sees Shaul HaMelech is sleeping. Right? He goes into a cave. David's on the run. David's on the run from the government. Yeah, they're all after him. Shaul HaMelech has gone a little bit crazy. He's chasing after David. He's got troops scouring the countryside for David. Har Yehuda, yeah, a few minutes away from us where we are. And David HaMelech, is hiding, and he goes into a cave, and he sees King Saul right there, Shaul HaMelech sleeping, fast asleep comfortably. And David HaMelech has a sword, and easily he could just do what? Kill him right over there. Yeah, would he be justified in killing him?
Yeah.
Why? Because Shaul is a rodef. Yeah, but instead of killing him, what does he do? He cuts off a piece of cloth. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar lo David l'Shaul min Torah. According to the Torah, ben hariga ata. You're chayav misa. I have a right to kill you. Sharei rodef ata, because you are a rodef. The Torah tells me I'm allowed to kill a rodef. Now, the point I want to see from this Gemara is one thing. That you see a rodef is not only in the attack situation. Right? Shaul HaMelech at that moment in time was not a rodef to David in a physical sense. He was sleeping. He was not there holding a gun to David. Right? The normal case of a rodef that we understand, that the Torah gives me a right to kill a person, is when the person's coming at me to kill me, I have to protect myself, so I'm allowed to kill that person. That wasn't the case over here at all. Right now, Shlomo HaMelech was completely safe. He was completely passive. But the Gemara understands that he's a rodef anyway. Why? Because his whole plan was to kill David HaMelech. Okay, so we understand, first of all, this idea. A rodef is not just a person who's right now coming to kill. A rodef is a person whose plan is to kill, whose goal is to kill, and who's got an idea. So what that means is like a terror cell. You have a group of terrorists so if they're right now running with guns, that's for sure. That's a rodef. You can kill them. But you see from here that even not in that situation, even in a situation where you know that there are people that are, their design, their goal, their whole object is to kill Jews, so they have a din of a rodef even when they are sleeping. Okay, so that's number one. So this is a potentially, or let's say, depending on the circumstances, this is a justification for killing what we would call quote-unquote innocent civilians. Right? In other words, a person who's a member of the army, of the opposing, enemy. So that for sure, those people are part of the army. Their whole job is to come and kill me. So to kill one of those people, that person is a rodef. Yeah, but what about the civilians? What about people that they themselves, are not right now? They're not posing any risk. Right? So what he's saying over here, kind of what the Gemara is saying, is that if you have a situation where there are people that are the etzem pose a risk, right? Their whole hashkafa, the whole perspective is to pose a risk to you, so that person has a halacha of a rodef right now. Okay, so now practically, how to apply this, in the army or in collective punishment and things like that, this would only be able to be applied if the situation was that there was intelligence that knew for a fact that this was a group of people, or that this was a village, or this was that their plan was to go and kill, right? Which again, that could be that's the case. I'm sure there are many Israeli operations that are done of this nature, and even though the world might say that these people are considered civilians, but if it's a civilian who is engaged in the interest in trying to kill, so that person is considered to be a rodef, even if they're not involved in the act. Now, that's okay, yeah.
Does it have anything to do with perspective? Because according to them, we look like the rodef, but according to us, they're the rodef.
Well, of course, that's what I said. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That's exactly the point, right? But we have the Torah, so the Torah tells us what we can and can't do. Again, we're going to see what the Torah has to say about this. Is it okay to hurt people that are innocent, etc.? Was this bus bombing okay? That happened to number 3 bus. So we're going to see that right now. But most cases are not this. Most cases are not the ticking bomb or the person that we know for sure is going to come and kill us. Most cases are similar, let's say, to that bus bombing or things that took place during the time of the siege of Yerushalayim, which we'll speak about. But there was a lengthy period of time that Yerushalayim was under siege, and the people in Jerusalem had no access to goods from outside. And the main Yerushalayim-Tel Aviv highway was almost impossible to pass because all the little towns on the hill were Arab villages, and they were, they would kill any of the convoys that came through. Yeah, everybody knows what I'm talking about. That on the Kvish Achad, on the main highway, you ever drive? There's like a few of these old army vehicles on the side of the road. Yeah. Does everybody know what that is? It's a memorial to these convoys of trucks that used to come, and people literally risked their lives, died, trying to bring food, medicine, all sorts of things to the Jews who were here in Yerushalayim. So a major strategic aspect of the times then was getting control of these Arab villages. Right? Villages like Castel along the highway and Moza, these types of places. These Arab villages were villages that were like basically controlling the highway, and they felt that taking control of these villages was critical for keeping the people in Yerushalayim alive. But now look, in those villages were not just terrorists. It was not just people with guns that were stopping the convoys. There were also men, women, children, elderly people, babies, and all of these people. And the question came up many times, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with a population, of innocent people? Is there any sort of justification? We're not talking about going in and mass slaughter. That's not, but what is the halachic perspective on this? So let's take a look at now number 3 and 4. What we're looking at now is how the Rishonim understood what Shimon and Levi did. Right? Shimon and Levi again went in and they just ethnically cleansed, I guess they would say nowadays, use the term. They cleansed this city completely. They killed all the people. And the question is, were they justified? Was it okay what they did or not? So it says the Rambam, source number 3 on the page, says the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, Perek Tes Lach Yudalef. V'ketzad B'tzavim Hein Aladinim. The Rambam is addressing here the Sheva Mitzvos B'nei Noach. A non-Jewish person is commanded in 7 mitzvos, and of those mitzvos, one of them is to set up a system of courts, to set up a justice system. And the halacha is a non-Jew who does not fulfill one of the 7 mitzvos or violates the 7 mitzvos, so they're liable for death. They're chayav misa. So technically, if you would have a non-Jewish society in which they specifically do not set up a legal system, or they have a actually corrupt legal system, so that is a society that the people responsible for that are chayav misa in halacha. Okay, that's the way it works. So that's what the Rambam says. And they have to set up a beis din. There have to be judges that are set up in courts in all the lands in order to enforce the law, in order to enforce the Shev Mitzvos. If Ben Noach is over one of these mitzvos, so they are liable for death. Because of this, says the Rambam, all of Shechem was chayav misa. All of Shechem was liable for death. Why? Sharei Shechem gozal. Because Shechem robbed, right? He stole a woman. He kidnapped a woman. V'hem ra'u v'yadu v'lo danuhu. And everybody saw, and nobody did anything about it. So what does that mean? They're not enforcing the Sheva Mitzvos. There's no court system over there. And if there's no court system there, there's a violation of the Sheva Mitzvos. They're all chayav misa. That's what the Rambam says.
If it's the king, though, it's the king.
Oh, very good, yeah. Okay, that's a separate thing. So the Rambam says he justifies Shimon and Levi. Now you see clearly, right? The Rambam does not learn that they did something wrong or usher. Right? The Rambam says, but when Yaakov addresses it, so you see Yaakov thought maybe it was a bad midah what they did, or they did it out of anger, or maybe some of Farshim say it was wrong that they also took all the spoils of the city, they took all the gold, that was wrong. Yeah, but the killing out of the city of Shechem, according to the Rambam, was justified because they did not keep the 7 mitzvahs, they didn't keep the halacha of setting up a court system, and by allowing this thing to take place. That's what the Rambam says. Says the Ramban, number 4, this is on the Parsha, this week's Parsha, the Ramban says, V'radam yishalu, many ask, V'eich asu b'nei Yaakov hatzadikim ha'maisa hazeh lishpoch dam naki. How did they do this? How did they go and kill all these innocent people? V'rav eishiv b'sefer shoftim, the Rambam answer is, V'amar shebei noach b'tzut maladinim b'hu, l'hoshiv dayanim b'hamabad, v'ben noach shavah v'bnei zeh neschayvu kol ba'al Shechem hariga, sharei Shechem gazal v'hem lo yadu. He quotes the Rambam. Okay, so he says the Rambam gives this explanation. This is not correct. This is not true. So why was Yaakov against it? What was Yaakov's issue with it then? If the Rambam is clear that they have to keep the Sheva Mitzvos and they didn't keep one of the mitzvos and therefore the Chayav Misa, so what was Yaakov so upset about? He should have been running in the front with the sword to go be Mekayim the mitzvah of the Torah. And maybe you want to say he was afraid, he didn't think he could do it, so he wasn't going to go ahead and do it now, but then why would he be upset at his kids? And he cursed their anger even many, many years later. So you see, it was something that bothered him. And he punished them. Right, so he's saying, and this is how the Ramban understands. The Ramban understands it was wrong. There was no justification for it. It was wrong what they did. Right? They had their perspective. Let's say, like Rav Ali said, how can we let this be? We can't let this be. Yeah, but that's not the halacha. That's not the way. We can't learn from Shimon and Levi. Yaakov, somebody said this. Yaakov's reaction was the right reaction to say, no, how could you do such a thing? Yeah, and curse them and scatter them in Klal Yisrael for this. Yeah, so we see that there's not so clear that we could take a lesson from Shimon and Levi over here in terms, again, of collateral damage, of collective punishment. It's not so clear that we could see a precedent here from Shimon and Levi. Okay, so let's see though the next source on the far side of this, and we're going to see over here.
What's his approach?
Rav Moshe Vali, he says it was the wrong thing to have done. In other words, he would not say to learn from here that it was the right thing to do. In other words, I think in that respect he agrees with the Ramban. But Shimon and Levi, from their side, were justified for seeing it their way. You know what I mean? In other words, their hatzdaka that he said is it's not. There's nothing inaccurate in what they're saying, but. According to Yaakov, it doesn't justify murder. It doesn't justify killing out that many people. It seems to me that he learns like the Ramban, that it wasn't the right thing to do, on the whole. But he explains, obviously, he was old in the Shemayim, and he explains, very interesting, this is a very side point, but he explains that obviously the people of Shechem, he says obviously the people of Shechem and Shechem himself, had a certain kedusha to them. They had a certain something. They all got a bris milah and then died. He said, that there was some sort of a tikkun there that they achieved through doing this. Like there was some spark of holiness that was a part of them that this whole event brought them up to their shlemos, which is an interesting way of looking at it. Okay, so let's just see this number 5. We'll get started with this, and then maybe we'll continue with it next time. And this is the Perush of the Maharal. Maharal in the Sefer Gur Aryeh, like from Chumash class. So Maharal addresses this as well. He addresses the situation of Shechem. And the approach of the Maharal, even though it's not exactly like the Ramban or the Rambam, but we'll see that the many poskim quote this Maharal as being a halachic source for understanding this with applications for us. And he says, let me find where it starts. Because he asks the question about the... Okay, but let's start like right in the middle. The Tiritz Rambam. Okay, you see where I am? In the middle of the first column. He asks the question, I don't want to read it again inside. But Tiritz Rambam, the Bnei Noach, Betzuv Maladinim, Vavera Achas, She'over Nera, Val Yado, V'kan Rova Maisa Ara Hazev, Lo Danu, L'kach Hayu, Chayavim Misa, Shelo Yu Daninosa. So he quotes the Rambam that the whole city was Chayav Misa because they did not properly judge Shechem. U'be'emes Davar Teima, Heim. It's a little bit wondrous. It's very hard to understand this. Elu advarim. Ki eich efshar lahem madon es ben asi aretz. Like I think Shira, like you said, how could they have come and brought Shechem to court? They're just regular people. The farmer who lived on the outskirts of the city that was killed. What did he have to do with anything? Yeah. Ki hayu yirei mehem. Of course, they were afraid of them. Va'af agav shenitztavu aladinim hainu kishiyuchlu ladon. So yes, it's true that the non-Jews have a halacha that they have to set up a court system and judge, but that's when they're capable of doing it. But we know this always, that if a person is stuck, it's out of their hands, they're not accountable for that. How could every little farmer and village person be accountable for not judging them? So he says, no, I'm going to explain to you what the story is here. Not like the Rambam and not like the Rambam. There was another mechanism at play over here, and this mechanism, we'll see, is something that is very pertinent for us. Dulo dami shnei umos kagon bnei Yisrael v'Kananim sheim shnei umos k'dichsiv v'haynu la'am echad u'metchila lo nechshavu la'am echad v'ficha chutu lahem lilchom k'din umma sheba lilchom al umma acheres she'etira haTorah. He's saying there's such a thing as war. Let's just think about this for a second. We're not going to have time to get into this. I'll just leave you with this one last question. Right? There's such a thing as war. What's a war? A war is when you've got one nation rising up against another one or defending against another one when there's lots and lots of killing that's going on. Right? And it's obvious that in a war, the Torah does not demand that we make sure that no civilian gets killed. That's what happens in a war. In a war, there's fighting, there's attacks, there's explosions. It's impossible to only kill the people who are shooting at us. So he says there's such an idea of war, of two nations that are at war, and in a war situation, the halacha is different. Even in a situation where we are attacked first, where they're starting up with us, even though only one of them did something and not all of them, since it's all one nation, it's an amazing thing. We'll have to learn this next time more. But the Maral says there's some idea in the Torah, there's a concept, a mechanism in the Torah that says as follows. That yes, to kill a person is for sure asur. And just to go and kill a person in revenge, that's for sure asur. But there's a concept of war. And when you have a war going on between two nations, so there's no such thing as guilty and innocent anymore. There's no such thing as innocent parties in a war. Right? And anybody in that nation that is involved in this is considered to be at war, and therefore they are a target, right, so to speak. Which really, again, this is exactly what they say. The Palestinians is exactly what they say. They're locked in a war with us, and therefore any one of us is a legitimate target. That's really, really weird. Okay, we'll have to continue with this next time. But hopefully you're getting a little bit of a perspective on this.